Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We continue on with our differences, and from the valid differences, you can wipe on the bandage if you're wearing a bandage due to some injury, and you can also wipe over the khuffain, as is well known. However, that's where the similarities end, because we say that the bandage you only wipe over it in a case of necessity, whereas wearing the khuffain is not due to a necessity. It is due to a need to keep your feet warm or to protect them, but that's not a necessity. The bandage, of course, is a necessity. And also, with the khuffain you just wipe over the top part, but with the bandage you wipe over the whole of it. So if the bandage is on your arm, then you wipe over all the way around, not just the top of it. So you wipe all the way around the arm. And also, the khuffain are only wiped in the hadath asghar, but the bandages can be wiped in the hadath akbar as well. And also there's no time limit on the bandages, whereas with the khuffain there is a time limit for the resident and for the traveller. Rather, the time limit for the bandages is up until your injury heals. Also, from the differences, if you're going to wipe over the khuffain, then of course it's a condition that you put the khuffain on after you made wudu with water, whereas the same is not true with the bandage. So these are some important differences between the khuffain and the jabira, which is the bandage. Jabira coming from the word jabr, which means to fix or mend something, and this is like a tafa'ul, or seeing it as a good sign or a good omen, that this jabira, the bandage, is going to heal or fix the injury. However, what about the amama for the man and the khimar for the woman? Both of these are head coverings and you can wipe over them, and the Prophet, we know, wiped over his amama. We have that authentic narration in the Sunan. Do we make analogy between that and the khuffain, such that we say that you can wipe over the amama and khimar if you wore them after the water tahara, the wudu? And also, is there a time limit, just like the khuffain? Well, here it appears that the weightier opinion is, no, we cannot make an analogy, because the amama and the khimar are there to wipe over the head, but the head is wiped over anyway, whereas with the khuffain, you're wiping over something where the asl is that you wash it, meaning the feet. So the head you wipe, the feet you wash, and that is a clear difference. And so with the khuffain, because the asl is that you wash the feet, we have to be strict. We have to say that you wear the khuffain upon the tahara, upon the wudu, and also we must give it a time limit. Whereas the same thing cannot be said with the amama and the khimar, because you wipe over the head anyway. So this is based on ease from the very first place. Whereas washing the feet, of course, is not based on ease. So it appears this analogy does not work. And so, therefore, we could say that you can wipe over the amama and the khimar, even if you wore it without a prior wudu preceding it. And also, we say that there is no time limit as well, because all of this is based on ease in the very first place, because wiping over the head is based upon ease. Otherwise, the asl would be that the sharia should order us to wash the head. But then washing the head could be difficult, and it could lead to some problems. For example, when it's cold or in the winter, you wash your head, it could lead to some harm being inflicted on your head due to the cold weather. And also from the valid differences, when you make tahara from the hadath, you must have a niyyah, an intention. But when you make tahara from najasa, which is the physical impurity, then you don't need to have a niyyah, an intention. Because when it comes to the najasa, the physical impurity, the only thing which matters is that it should be removed. When it's removed, this suffices. Whereas when it comes to the tahara from the hadath, then this is an act of ibadah, and it must be accompanied with a niyyah. So this is why we say, whether you're making wudu or tayammum or ghusl from the hadath akbar, all of this needs to have a niyyah, an intention, because it is an act of ibadah. As for removing najasa, for example, let's say you have urine on your clothes or on your body or in the place in which you're going to pray, then this does not require an intention. So even if, let's say, rain falls and removes this urine, then this suffices. Of course, you did not intend the rain to fall, it fell without you even knowing about it. So how could you possibly have an intention? However, we say this is perfectly fine. Whereas on the other hand, let us suppose you're in a state of janaba and you have to take a bath. You're walking along a riverbank and you slip and you fall into the river and you inadvertently take a bath because your whole body is soaked. Do we now say that you are removed from the hadath akbar? The answer is no, because you did not have the intention to take a bath. And also from the differences is that when it comes to najasa, we can divide it up into three categories. So one of them is the najasa mughalladha, the very severe form of najasa, and this is the saliva of the dog. Some of the scholars also said the pig as well, but there's no evidence for this. As for the dog, we have evidence. So if a dog licks into the bowl or drinks some water from the bowl, then you have to wash it 7 times, the first one being with dust. And no other najasa needs to be cleansed in this way. Then on the other hand, we have the najasa mukhaffafa, the light form of najasa, and this is the urine of the male child who is still breastfeeding, or whose main diet is breastfeeding. Now, the way to purify this is simply to sprinkle water on where he has urinated. And this is what we have evidence for. The child urinated on the clothes of the Prophet, and the Prophet simply sprinkled water on it. Likewise, he says in the Sunan authentically, يُرَشُّ مِنْ بَوْلِ الْغُلَامِ وَيُغْسَلُ مِنْ بَوْلِ الْجَارِيَةِ. The male child's urine is just to be sprinkled over with water, and the female child's urine is to be washed properly as normal. As for other things like vomit and pus and phlegm and so on, even though these are dirty things, but they're not given the ruling of being najis. Najasa is a hukum shar'i for which you need dalil shar'i. And then in the middle we have the najasa mutawassita, the medium or middle najasa, and this is all other types of najasa, and however it is removed, then it is good enough. It does not even have to be with water. And it has been said by some scholars that with this type of najasa, you also must clean it 7 times, taking the analogy with the dog's saliva, but we say no, there cannot be any analogy here. Rather, we say, anyway the najasa is removed, then this is good enough. And some others have said that you must wash it 3 times, and again, there's no evidence for any of this. And also from the valid differences that blood is of 3 types. Number 1, the impure type of blood, and even if you have a little of it or much of it on your clothes, then it must be removed, and we do not overlook it and say, well, we'll let you off and you can pray in this clothing. No, even a little amount must be removed. And this is the blood of all types of najis or impure animals, like a dog and the like. And then secondly, we have the blood which is tahir, or pure, and this is the blood which remains in the animal after you have slaughtered it in the halal fashion. So this would be the remnants of the blood in the meat and the veins of the animal. Likewise, we can include in this category the blood of the fish, because the fish is tahir, even the dead fish is tahir. So any animal who has died a natural death and is pure, then its blood is tahir. As for those animals which, if they die a natural death, then they are najis, then their blood is also najis, because ultimately it's the blood which is causing the najasa. So if you see it in this way, then we would have to say that the human blood is also tahir, because the dead human is tahir. And if, let's say, a hand of a human is cut off, then this hand is tahir. So the blood is also tahir then, because it's the blood which causes the najasa. However, many scholars say that when it comes to human blood, it is najis, but a little bit of it on you is overlooked. So a little bit of human blood over you is overlooked in that you can pray in this clothing. And the other opinion says that the human blood, even a lot of it, is still tahir, and they base the analogy on the fish. The blood of the fish is tahir. And we know in the battles many of the Sahaba would have been bleeding quite a lot, and we don't know that the Prophet ﷺ ordered them to remove the blood from the clothing as they prayed. Yes, it is true that Fatima, the daughter of the Prophet, washed the blood of the Prophet's face during the Battle of Uhud, but that does not prove that blood is najis, because you could wash something off because it does not look good, not necessarily because it is najis. So from this then, some ulama may say that the blood of the human is tahir except that which comes out from the 2 passages, the front and the back, the passage of the stool and the passage of the urine. And this is because the women are ordered to cleanse the menstrual blood, and also the generality of the istinja and istijmar, and that only applies to what exits from the 2 passageways. And then besides, blood from this passageway could be in contact with the najasa as it leaves, so it ought to be removed and cleansed. So if we say that the dead fish then is tahir, and the blood of the dead fish therefore is also tahir, is it permissible to drink the blood of the dead fish? Or for example, if you cut a fish and it's living and blood flows, is that blood permissible to be drunk? Well, the answer here is that there's nothing to say that it is haram, and the blood is tahir, and the hadith tells us that the water of the sea is tahir and its dead are halal, meaning the dead fish and the dead sea creatures, and so that also includes the blood as well. So in that opinion, you can also drink the blood of the fish. But then in the Quran we find the ayah أو دما مسفوحا, or flowing blood, and that this is haram. But the answer to that is that the daman masfuhan, the flowing blood, is for the land creatures, because the ayah here is talking about land creatures, not sea creatures. As for sea creatures, there is a separate ruling altogether. And then we have the third category, which is that the blood is najis, but a little bit of it can be overlooked. And so from this would be the flowing blood of the land creatures. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, قُلْ لَا أَجِدُ فِي مَا أُوحِيَ إِلَيَّ مُحَرَّمًا على طاعم يطعمه إلا أن يكون ميتة أو دما مسفوحا أو لحم خنزير فإنه رجس. Say, I do not find in anything which has been revealed to me that which is haram for the one who wants to eat it, except that it should be dead animal, or flowing blood, or the meat of the pig, because it is najis. Rijis here means najis. So even though this blood is najis, a little bit of it can be overlooked. So if you have a little bit of this blood on you, like on your clothing, then you can still pray in that. And it has been narrated that Ibn Mas'ud sacrificed a camel and he prayed in the clothing which had some blood of that camel. So we say that if this narration is in fact authentic, then this blood would have been a very little amount. Actually, Ibn Taymiyyah goes a step further. He says that a little bit of any type of najasa is overlooked, because of the difficulty it leads to removing it. And also from the valid differences is an interesting one. The young child who has not reached the age of tamyiz, his hajj is valid, but all the other acts of worship for him are invalid, except for the zakah as well, because with the zakah it is obligatory on the wealth. Now the wealth does not make a distinction between who is mumayyiz and who is not. So even on the zakah of the sabi, or the young child, the obligation is applicable. Likewise, on the wealth of the mad person, there is zakah. And also, the mad person can perform a valid hajj, just like the sabi can. But when it comes to the rest of the acts of worship, then you need tamyiz, which is the age at which you can understand speech and obey and undertake simple orders. So a sabi, for example, cannot fast. His fasting would be invalid, and his prayer would be invalid. So its presence is like its absence. And from the valid differences from which we can categorize are the different types of awrah in the salah. So number one is the ghalidha, the severe type of awrah, and this is the awrah of the woman. The Shaykh says that she must cover everything in the salah except for the face. Then the second type of awrah is the khafifa, the light type of awrah, and this is the awrah of someone who is 7 years old up until the age of 10, and this would just be the front and back passage. This is enough for his awrah to be covered in the salah. As for below 7, then he does not have any awrah. But then again, a child below 7 does not pray. His prayer is invalid anyway. Then we have the third type, and this is the person who does not fall into the first two categories, in which case the awrah is from beneath the belly button to above the knee. And again, we're talking about the awrah here in the salah. And when we talk about covering the awrah, there's no point in covering the awrah with something which is see-through or almost see-through. Rather, it needs to be something which will actually cover the awrah, so the material needs to be thick enough. And also, it ought not to be tight. It should be loose so that it does not make out the shape of the awrah. And also, no doubt that the clothing must be tahir, which covers the awrah, because of course in the salah it is a condition that you are wearing pure clothing as opposed to the najis ones. And also, the madhab of the Hanabila says that this clothing needs to be permissible. So if it is stolen clothing, for example, you cannot use that to cover the awrah, and for you to cover the awrah with that would be as if you did not cover the awrah. But the correct opinion here is that even if the clothing is impermissible to be worn, for example stolen clothing and the like, and the awrah is covered, then your salah is still correct, because at the end of the day the awrah is covered. Sure, you are sinful for wearing the haram clothing, but that's from another direction. It has no effect on the salah. What about the thighs of a man? Are they awrah? Well, in the salah they are awrah, because when Allah Jalla wa Ala tells us to take our adornments in the salah, this means take your good clothing in the salah, but if your thighs are uncovered, it completely goes against this ayah. At least the thighs must be covered, even if your knees are not. As for outside the salah, then we can say that if the man is young, then he should cover his thighs, because it could cause a fitna if he does not cover it. As for if he is an old man, then there would not seem to be too much of a problem for him to uncover the thighs. And sometimes older men may need to uncover their thighs as they work on the fields and so on. Otherwise, the thighs are from the awrah, no doubt, but they are from the lighter type of awrah outside the salah. But in the salah, they are much more emphasized to be covered. It is not fitting for any man to be praying with his thighs uncovered. As for the woman's awrah inside the salah, then the Shaykh says that the face can be uncovered. However, we can justifiably say that the face, hands and feet can be uncovered, because there is no strong evidence to suggest that they must be covered. Rather, we know that Allah Jalla wa Ala does not accept the prayer of an adult woman without a khimar, and a khimar is that which covers your head. But in the presence of non-mahram men, of course, then the whole woman is an awrah, and it is not permissible for any man to look at a non-mahram woman except due to a need or a necessity. So if the woman is praying outside where even a non-mahram man could see her, then she would need to cover the feet, hands and face as well. Some scholars go by the opinion that the woman can uncover the face and the hands even in front of a non-mahram man. Well, upon that opinion then, if she's praying outside, then she would cover everything except the face and the hands. But in the privacy of her own home, we have good reasons to say that she can uncover the face, hands and the feet. What if a non-mahram man has to look at a woman, for example a medical examination? Well, the ideal situation is that a Muslim woman doctor should examine the Muslim woman. If not, then a kafira woman doctor. If not, then the Muslim male doctor can. But in the case that she can only find a male doctor, then we say yes, that's permissible then for the male doctor to examine her, whichever part needs to be examined, as long as only the necessary part is examined. The reason why a man is not allowed to look at a non-mahram adult woman, who is free of course, not a servant woman, because a servant woman does not wear hijab, she has a different ruling, but we are talking about the adult female who is free. The reason why he's not allowed to look at her is to block off the road to fitna. So it is to block off the road to zina. So whatever is made haram, in order to block off the road to haram, then such an action can be made permissible due to a need, not necessarily a necessity. So, for example, a man is allowed to look at the face of the woman he's proposing to. This is not a necessity, this is a need, because you can still get married to a woman even without having looked at her. It's not a necessity that you look at her, rather it is a need, and a need is less than a necessity, because if a necessity is not fulfilled, life will become either unlivable or almost unlivable. But if a need is not fulfilled, then life can still be livable, only with some inconvenience, that's all. So a need, a haja, is less than a darura, a necessity. So looking at the woman you're proposing to is not darura, rather it is a haja, a need. But a man is allowed to do this, because the prohibition of looking at a non-mahram woman is because it leads to that which is ultimately haram. And so the action which is made haram because it leads to that which is haram can be permissible due to a need, which is less than a necessity. As for an action which is haram in and of itself, then this can only be made permissible due to a darura, a necessity, not merely a haja, a need. So notice that difference. And whoever is below the age of 7, then such a person does not have an awrah in the first place. So he or she is not obliged to cover anything. And as for those females who are below the age of adolescence and they are not from your maharim, or those women who are from your maharim but they are adult women, then what are you allowed to look at from them? Well, here you're allowed to look at them whatever is customarily normal. So for example, if you have a sister or an aunt, then you're allowed to look at their face, their head, their necks, their arms and their lower legs. And this is what is deemed to be normal in the customs. However, we need to immediately make an important restriction here. We say that yes, he is allowed to look at her what is customarily normal. However, it needs to be controlled by one factor, that it should not produce fitna in this man. So even if looking at the neck or the lower leg of his sister or aunt would produce fitna in that man, then this is impermissible without a doubt. And he cannot hide behind the customs of the people he's living in and say that he's allowed to look. He's not allowed to look here. Because ultimately, what we are trying to prevent is fitna. This is what the whole issue revolves around. What about in a court case? Is a non-mahram man allowed to look at this woman in a court case if he has to testify for or against her? The answer here is most certainly yes. Because this would be a case of darura. We could be involved in a crime case, for example. And without doubt, justice must be served. And if it cannot be served without the testimony, then so be it. And also from the different categories is clothing. We could put it in 3 categories. The clothing which is halal for men and women. And this is the asl here with clothing, is that it is halal. All types of clothing is halal. And then we have the second type which is haram for males and females. And this will be the clothing which is usurped, or clothing which resembles the kuffar, in that which the kuffar are known for, meaning their emblem. Or clothing which resembles women's clothing for men, or men's clothing for women, because men are not allowed to imitate women, nor women men. And then we have the third type, haram for males, halal for females, and this would be clothing of gold and silk. However, with the gold, a man is allowed to have this gold on his clothing as long as it is 2, 3, or 4 fingers worth, because we have evidence for that. In fact, we can say that if the gold is of a minor amount or a negligible amount on your clothing, then this is permissible. We do have evidence in Al-Bukhari that the Prophet wore clothing which had gold buttons on it. Now this gold here on his clothing is of a negligible amount or minor amount. So a minor amount of gold is permissible for the men's clothing, but it does need to be a very minor amount. It must not be too noticeable or dominant in the clothing. And also from the categories, the movements in the salah, we can divide it up into 4 categories. Number 1, those movements which render your salah invalid. And these are movements which are much, as seen by the people in the customs. They are consecutive. So much and consecutive, and they are not part of the actual prayer, and they are done without a need to do so. So in other words, to sum up, they are much, they are consecutive, without any particular need, and they are not part of the actual prayer. So what are we talking about here? We are talking about things like fiddling with your watch, your clothes, scratching yourself, and all this type of thing. You do it much and consecutively, and without any particular need to do so, such that if somebody was to look at you, he would say, no, this person is not in his prayer, that's how much he's moving. So if it reaches this amount of level, then it renders your salah invalid. Why is this the case? Because one of the essential elements is tum'anina, where you are tranquil and at rest and at ease with yourself, and this type of movement completely destroys this pillar of your prayer. But this type of movement, which nullifies the prayer, are you allowed to do this in the nafilah? Because in a nafilah, you're allowed to break off the nafilah, are you not? Well, we say that, yes, you're allowed to break off your nafilah without a pressing need, but you are still not allowed to make this type of movement in your nafilah prayer, because if you did, you would be as if you are making fun of the prayer. And of course, making fun of the prayer, even if it is a nafilah, is haram. Then the second category, we have the movements which are makruh, and these would be movements not pertaining to the prayer, but they are of a little amount without a need. So for example, you are just fixing your watch. So for example, you pull the pin out from your wristwatch, you adjust the time, and then you plug the pin back in, and it takes you about 10 odd seconds. This is makruh because there is no need for you to do this. You could easily adjust the watch after the prayer. But because this action is of a little amount, then we say it is makruh. Then the third category is the actions which are mubah or permissible, and these are actions which are of course not part of the prayer, but if it's a small amount of action and you do it due to a haja, a need, then this is permissible. Or if it is many actions which you perform, but it is due to a darura, a necessity, then again, this is permissible. It might be the case that you have an incredible itch and you have to scratch yourself for a long time. Now this would be a necessity, and you're allowed to do this, even though the action is much, but because it's due to a necessity, you're allowed to do it. And then in the fourth category, we have those actions not pertaining to the salah, but they are ordered for you to do. So for example, you're in the salah and you find that there is a gap in front of you in the Salat al-Jama'ah, you are ordered to move into that gap, even though walking forward is not part of your original salah. Or for example, you are standing in the saf and you are a little ahead of the rest of the saf, so you're not in line. So what you do, you take a step or two backwards to get into line. Again, taking a step or two backwards is not part of the original salah, but we are ordered to do so because we are ordered to straighten the rows and to fill in the gaps. In fact, we find exactly that happening in the Salat al-Khawf, where in one of the descriptions of the Salat al-Khawf, you have the back row of the prayer moving to the front row and the front row moving to the back row deliberately. However, when we talk about actions which you're ordered to do, we could further divide them up into two categories. So altogether, the actions in this will become 5 categories. So when it comes to actions which you're ordered to do, they could either be wajib or mustahab. As for the wajib actions, then this would be actions on which the validity of your prayer depends. For example, facing the qibla. If you're facing the wrong way, then it is wajib for you to turn and face the correct way. Or for example, if you find some najasa on you, it is wajib for you to remove this najasa during the prayer, even though it is not part of the actual actions of the prayer. If for example you find some najasa on your amama, you remove the amama. We know the Prophet removed his shoes when he found najasa on his shoes during the prayer. As for the recommended type of actions, then this would be things like filling in the gap of the row in front of you, or taking a few steps here and there to straighten the row out. The prayer would still be correct even if the rows were not straight. However, these are from the recommended actions because they complete your prayer or they perfect your prayer. So all in all then, we can say actions are of 5 types in the prayer, and these are actions which are not pertaining to the actual prayer itself. So we've talked about the haram actions, and that nullifies the prayer. We talked about the makruh action, the mubah action, the mustahab action, and the wajib action. And also from the differences and categories which we can make, that the takbir in the salah is of 3 types. The first category is that we say it is rukn, and that's the first takbir, the takbiratul ihram. And also the takbirat in the Salat al-Janaza, normally it is 4, but there is a difference of opinion here, it could be 5 as well, and other numbers have been narrated. Then the second category are those takbirat which are recommended to do, and this would be a takbir which, let's say a man joins the prayer late, and the imam is in the ruku', he makes the takbiratul ihram, that is of course a rukn, so he makes the takbiratul ihram standing up. But then, does he make the takbir going into ruku', or would the takbiratul ihram suffice? Well, the takbiratul ihram would suffice, but if he made a second takbir in going into ruku', this is recommended. And then in the third category, we have all the rest of the type of takbirat, and these are wajib from the salah. So this would be the takbiratul intiqal, takbir from going from one position to the other. And also from the categories which we can make, passing by in front of the one who is praying, we can put it into 3 types. That which will cut off or break off the prayer. And this is 3 types. A pure black dog, jet black, not mixed with any other color. A woman passing by, and we're talking about an adult woman here. And thirdly, a donkey passing by. If these 3 pass in front of you, you're praying, so they pass in front of you between you and your sutra, then it breaks off the prayer and you have to start again. This is if you're not a ma'moom. This is if you are either the imam or praying by yourself. Then the second category is that which would make your prayer deficient but not break it. And this is the passing by of anyone not in the first category. And the third category is that which would not disturb your prayer at all. And this would be people passing in front of you in the Al-Masjid Al-Haram when it is very crowded due to people making tawaf. And in this category, we're talking about the person praying in the mataf, the place of the tawaf. Now, he does not have a sanctity in the first place because the mataf needs to be for those making tawaf. They have the priority, so he should not be praying there anyway. This is why if a person passes by in front of him, then the ta'if has the priority, not the one who is praying. And in fact, you can intentionally pass by in front of the one who is praying, and this would be like a ta'zir for him. He should not be praying there anyway. However, many other scholars have said that anywhere in the Masjid al-Haram, not just the mataf, you can pass by in front of the one who is praying. However, we would say that we would agree if it is a case of necessity and you cannot pass by any other way. But as for if you can find another way to go around, then you must do so. Because for a person to wait there for 40 is better than to pass by in front of the one who's praying,
if he knew the sin of passing by in front of the musalli. Okay, let's take some review questions. Question number 1. Give 4 differences between wiping over the bandage and wiping over the khuffain. Question number 2. We mentioned 5 types of movements in the salah which are not part of the original salah. Explain what these 5 types of movements are. Question number 3. Is it permissible to pass by in front of the musalli in the mataf? Give the detail here.